Nancy Pelosi is doing what she, in her leadership of the Democratic Party in the House as Speaker, and the Democrats in Congress do best, and that is create the theater, create the illusion of action on the needs of working people in a crisis without actually creating, actually governing. The latest in this racket here is Pelosi has announced the creation of Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth. So Pelosi issued the statement in which she said the following: I'm proud to announce the creation of the new bipartisan Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth, which will be an essential force in congressional Democrats' action to combat the crisis of income and wealth disparity in America. She says, we're creating the Select Committee, which will be a resource to the Congress to make policy related to economic fairness, access to education, and workforce development. Working with the committees of jurisdiction, the Select Committee will study and recommend proposals to make our economy work for everyone, powering economic growth while ensuring that no one is left out or left behind in the 21st century economy. Okay, so that's nice. And she also says here, it is molded after the mission of the temporary National Economic Committee, founded by President Roosevelt and the Congress after the Great Depression to study and combat the concentration of wealth in America and its role in triggering economic collapse. Okay, so she's comparing her work here to that of FDR. Uh, uh, Okay, so that's cute. So FDR is one of our greatest presidents. I'm going to provide here a quick rundown of some top line items that were accomplished under the Roosevelt administration. That includes the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Glass-Steagall, which was the separation of investment banking away from commercial banking, which was, of course, repealed under the Clinton administration. The National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, Social Security, the Works Progress Administration, which was a national jobs program that took unskilled laborers and put them to work creating American roads and highways and bridges and so forth. So he created the Federal Housing Authority. He created the he also sought passage of the Judiciary Reorganization Bill of 1937, which was the court packing plan that you might have heard about when the Supreme Court, the conservatives on the Supreme Court, struck down as unconstitutional some of his executive orders, because a lot of his governance was unilateral action. It was executive order. So he was aggressive. He was a fighter. And when the Supreme Court challenged his right, challenged his mandate, his authority to take action during, at the time, a Great Depression, at the time, the greatest depression in our nation's history, he acting in his role as a fighter, in his capacity as a true champion of the people, he fought back and he put immense political pressure on the Supreme Court, similar to the way Abe Lincoln had in 1857 and 58, 59, when he was running for president, right before he started the Civil War. He was putting political pressure that basically made it so the Supreme Court was weakened, and its political, even though they managed to strike down some of his executive orders, they were so weakened because his economic policies were so popular that he was able to immediately enact through Congress. He went through Congress, but he was able to effectively pass a lot of the same type legislation that were in the same spirit of the stuff that the Supreme Court had undermined and undercut. He came right back at them. He said, well, listen, I got elected here. At that point, he had been reelected. So he said, well, listen, this was right before he was reelected. I'm sorry. But then he got reelected. He said, well, I'm the most popular politician in the country, and you're a bunch of unelected hacks. And the Constitution doesn't even allow for judicial review. So you guys are just enriching yourselves here. So how about I put pressure on you and I come after you? So why do I mention FDR, right? Why is this relevant? You're probably thinking, damn, Chris, you're going off on a tangent. No, I'm not. FDR was a fighter. I'm just trying to illustrate that FDR fought materially, and there is a litany of programs and executive orders and historical legislation and program that he enacted as our president, that somebody like Nancy Pelosi or the mainstream establishment media that talk about Joe Biden and sort of take FDR's legacy for granted by just casually drawing that historical parallel, comparing Biden to FDR. Biden's going to be the most progressive president since FDR. This is who they're comparing Biden to. I just mentioned previously in a previous video I just did that Biden was working overtime behind the scenes as a moderating influence on corporate Democrats during COVID relief negotiations with Republicans. He's the reason why the $1,200 that was being demanded by progressives, populists in the Senate, Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley's not a progressive; he's a populist. He's the reason that $1,200 came down to $600 because he gave those corporate Democrats permission to go with their gut that more austerity for the working class is always best, and go with your gut, and it's socialism for the rich, etc. So and I already mentioned Kamala in a previous video. Kamala, just his vice president, obviously just gave Mitch McConnell permission to go ahead and vote on your precious $740 billion National Defense Authorization Act bill that's going to overwhelmingly benefit the board of directors over at Raytheon. Go vote on that, and this $2,000 thing, don't worry about that. Do you, and then maybe at some point eventually we'll get back to people who are starving in this country, 26 million people. So the priorities are completely backwards. And so now here's Nancy Pelosi. This is the latest effort to convince, to assure Americans that don't worry, I hear you guys. And even though Nancy Pelosi has failed and outright refused to bring Medicare for all, the single most popular legislative proposal in government today, the single most popular policy item in American politics today. 70% of Americans, including 52%, 46 to 52% of Republicans, depending on the poll, favor a Medicare for all system, including in all those primary states that Biden prevailed over Bernie in the spring. Everywhere from Florida and Arizona to Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, all those primary voters said overwhelmingly, no, look, the media told us Biden's electable, so we'll go with Biden. But no, we agree with Bernie. We think healthcare should be a human right. Okay, so Nancy Pelosi is the leader of the House. If she wants to put Medicare all up for a vote, she'll put it all up for a vote. And the reason why that's significant is because the single job of our elected leaders, the reason why we elect them and send them to Washington to represent us, is so they can do votes, so that they can hold votes. And Nancy Pelosi has refused in her 2 years as Speaker, since Democrats took back the House majority in 2018. Nancy Pelosi has refused to bring this issue, again, a totally non-controversial issue, right, overwhelmingly popular, to a vote. So this is the problem with Washington. We never get the votes. Right now, Mitch McConnell is working overtime to outmaneuver Democrats and outmaneuver the leader of his own party, President Donald Trump, who's tweeting all day and night about his support for $2,000 checks. He's trying to outmaneuver all these people just to get out of holding a vote on $2,000 checks, which enjoys the support of 80% of the American public. So even more overwhelmingly support than Medicare for all. And he's working overtime just to prevent a vote because he thinks that holding the vote would reflect poorly on his caucus, when it turns out that more Republicans go on record against than in favor of with the vote. So no, it wouldn't pass. And you know what? Neither would Medicare for all. But we send our elected officials to Washington to do something that they never do, which is to vote on issues that impact us materially. And that's all we ask for, is a standalone vote. Rachel Bovard was talking about this on Rising with Crystal Ball recently. That's all we ask for, is for you to hold a standalone vote, straight up or down, yes or no vote, issue by issue. Instead, Mitch McConnell is out here in the Senate trying to attack on, all right, we'll do $2,000 checks, but let's make sure that we couple it up with Section 230 repeal, which is basically a liability shield, the repeal of a liability shield that tech companies, internet platforms have, that gives them liability, that gives them protection from being sued for content that their users on their platforms post. So some nonsense that doesn't resonate at all, or some sham committee. Donald Trump is actively trying to steal the election as we speak. So Donald Trump saying, well, give me the investigative committee, give me the Section 230 repeal. He has a grudge with, by the way, Twitter and Facebook, because they've dared to occasionally fact check him during all his during his lying about the election is rigged against him. No, he's trying to rig the election, but because he has that personal grudge, he's so petty. He's trying to do all these things at once. So Mitch McConnell is playing Trump by torpedoing, by making this $2,000 thing less attractive, by coupling all these things that the American public doesn't give a shit about, Section 230 repeal, or this investigation into widespread claims of voter fraud, Trump's political project. American public doesn't care. They want a straight up or down vote on $2,000. Mitch McConnell says, well, Trump seems to want all these things, and the Democrats don't. So how do I avoid a vote and making my Republican caucus look bad? I'll just put them all together. That way I can technically say that, I had Donald Trump's back, the leader of my party, the most popular Republican in the country, and that, look, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, my Republicans that are up for re-election, for Senate re-election next week in Georgia, they're in favor. They paid lip service to supporting it, even though they don't really, but at least they could pay rhetorical lip service. So nothing ever gets voted on that the American public wants. Instead, what we do get is that National Defense Authorization Act, which is not even a must-pass spending bill, by the way. That's the priority. That's the single priority that McConnell and Senate Republicans wanted to see passed before the Senate expires. This year's senatorial term expires in Saturday. They're going to get that vote. They're not going to get the $2,000 checks to people, and Nancy Pelosi is not going to get Medicare for all vote for us, probably even in the next 2 years under a Democratic administration. But she's out here promising us, don't worry, I'm gonna do this. I'm not gonna govern in practice. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna provide the theater of governance, and that's what this is about. This is an excuse. This basically does two things. This creates the impression that Nancy Pelosi is doing something. This committee on income inequality. So she's trying to draw the historical parallel to FDR. FDR obviously was very productive, accomplished a lot. So no, I'm like FDR. So she's creating the impression that she's doing something without actually doing it. And she's keeping the progressive members of her Democratic caucus, the squad, the AOCs, the Rashida Tlaibs, Ilhan Omars of the world, the Ro Khannas, she's keeping them busy, giving them kind of an ego stroke, allowing them to sort of feel good, like they're being productive, like they're getting something done, without them actually in practice getting anything done. Because again, the bottom line is, the only thing that matters in Congress is floor votes, all right? Action on the floor. So let's keep you off the floor, right? As long as the progressives, the ones that actually care, the ones that actually represent their voters' interests, the working class Democrats, as long as they're off the floor and they're working on some committee that's going to do this, that, and the third, and create some report that nobody's ever going to read or care about and that'll never resonate, as long as they're doing that, that means they're not on the floor, and we don't got to be having this conversation about Medicare for all, because there's less pressure on us. So that's how the Democratic Party politics are. They're just as bad as the Republicans. Very unfortunately, that's what this is about with this committee. And again, we want real material action, but we don't want to see these committees. You know what I mean? Nobody cares about these committees. No, people want Medicare for all, and people want $2,000, and we're not getting these votes, and that is honestly that's devastating. That's very unfortunate. I've talked about, there is a campaign. By the way, this is probably going to make those progressive Democrats that are going to be, that are likely going to be assigned to this committee. This is probably going to make them feel good and give them hope, similar to the way those Biden-Bernie task forces that were assembled after Biden became the Democratic nominee sort of haven't been talked about since, but sort of contributed to making people feel like something was getting done, like they were a part of something, like they were engaged in a process. We haven't heard anything from those committees since. Biden allegedly has assured his donors, his wealthy donors behind the scenes, that his Wall Street donors, that, hey, listen, those task forces, you don't got to worry about that. So this is basically the latest iteration of that. Nancy Pelosi, again, creating the theater of governance without actually governing. And it's disappointing.